There it is.
Okay. I'm a technophobe, I admit it.
Right.
Okay. So, ladies, gentlemen, and little critters, I am delighted for the very first issue of our KSOA to welcome Dinosaur George Blasing. George is a self-taught paleontologist and educator with over 50 years of study and the host of the Dinosaur George Kids podcast. He has, oh, how many downloads do you have on your podcast by now, George?
Uh 2,030,000, I think.
Okay, it's climbing.
Yeah.
In over, last I checked, it was in over 140 cities, but I bet that's gone up.
Yeah, I think it is. I want to say it's like 180 cities. I
Oh,
think of the
wow.
last time I checked, something like that.
That's rad.
Yeah.
Cities and has performed live to over 4 million people, probably over 150 billion people by now, and has lectured in over 4,000 4,000 museums. You may remember him from the History Channel show Jurassic Fight Club, which he co-created, wrote, and hosted. He's logged hundreds of hours with his traveling museum where he could bring a dinosaur exhibit to your school, library, etc. Okay, so George, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Happy to do it.
And can you tell us about your first experience ever finding a dinosaur fossil?
Yeah. The first time I got to go dig dinosaurs. Now I had found lots of fossils. I grew up in a small community outside of San Antonio. We had a lot of Cretaceous sea life. So clams and oysters and crabs and ammonites and things like that. And I had been finding those since I was a child. But the first time I had the opportunity to go look for dinosaurs, I was probably 24 years old at the time, maybe 25. And Jim Madsen, who I befriended, and he was such a kind man, he set up an opportunity for me to go into Utah and look at some property. And he said, you might find something, you might find nothing. And so, anyway, I got to go. And the very first thing I saw turned out to be the tail vertebra from an Allosaurus. And growing up, Allosaurus was my favorite dinosaur, had always been my favorite. So not only did I find my first bone, not only did I find it with Jim Madsen, but it turned out to be Allosaurus, which turned out to be Allosaurus jimmadsoni. So that Allosaurus was named after him. So
Yeah,
it was the most spectacular thing.
I didn't. I didn't make the so the Allosaurus in the first issue is an Allosaurus jimitsoni. Or how do you pronounce it?
Well, Jim Madsen, so I pronounce it Jim Madsoni.
Okay,
But it there's not a you're transposing English to Latin, Latin to English. There's not
right.
necessarily a right or wrong way to do it.
I actually didn't know where the last name came from on that one because you tend to hear more about Allosaurus fragilis,
Right. Yeah.
and so I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. So I'll do. So I have a toy that I use as reference when I draw, and the toy says it's Allosaurus jimetsoni, and I was like, oh, I okay. So yeah,
Well, I
that's
saw that when I was looking at your art, and I noticed you that you had drawn. You said Jim Madsen. I was
yeah,
so thrilled about that. I'm thinking this is such a complete circle to come
right.
back to this. That now I'm getting the opportunity to be interviewed by a man who's drawing a picture of the dinosaur that I loved, of the man that I loved, of the first dinosaur I ever found.
Where generally in Utah, where was that?
Kind of near uh the oh my gosh, the Cleveland Lloyd Quarry.
Okay,
Very that's where Jim dug. That's where
okay,
Jim Madsen spent most of his time digging.
yeah.
And so it was near there. Kind of, is it by Pace? I'm trying to think of the closest.
Price. I think it might be. I think it's price.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, that's exactly right. There you go, Price. That's exactly right.
So I know everybody loves Thanksgiving Point, and I don't mean any disrespect to Thanksgiving Point, but my favorite dinosaur museum is actually in Price
Yeah.
because they have a Utah raptor mound that it's so dynamically posed. Like it's got like its hind foot up with its paw, like it's ready to end the conversation.
Right. Well,
And
that's
it
what I
like
like. That's what I like about your artwork. I don't know if you heard the last podcast, but I made a comment about your art on podcast number 160. Um,
listen to it yet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I made a comment about the art that you posted on our Dinosaur George Kids page, and I mentioned about how much I appreciate your ability to bring motion and movement into your art. That's not it's not as common as you would suspect. And so I totally appreciate your point about that Utah raptor. When we were filming Jurassic Fight Club, we went to that museum to film, and you're right. It's not that army soldier pose of being
yeah,
frozen. I don't like that. I like motion, movement.
dynamic.
Oh my gosh, it inspires children's minds and adults. It
Yeah,
inspires us to complete what's happening. To look at
yeah.
a picture and go, that's cool is one thing, but for you to complete the scene because
Mhm.
you've created such a living representation, that's a gift not everybody has. And you certainly have it with your art.
Appreciate that. Um, the have you been to the I'm sure you have, but have you been to Dinosaur National Monument, George?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. When we first moved to Utah back in 2019, we thought we were going to live in a town called Vernal. It's only about a 20, 30 minute drive. So
Right.
the first day we got here, we checked into a hotel and let's go. I want to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing location. I'm more amazed that they are willing to leave those fossils there for people
Yeah,
to see. I just couldn't do it. I would have to take them out.
that's one of the only places that I can think of where you can put your hands on that being actual
Yeah.
bone fossil.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and,
It's not
and
it's not the
I get why most museums use plaster casts, and I don't mean any disrespect to that, but it's just really cool to be able to like, get your hands on
it is. And it's a big deal to touch the fossil of an animal an animal that was living and breathing at one time. I mean, I've dug up thousands of dinosaur bones in my life, and I can tell you that every single time I pick one up, the first thing I think about is this was a living, breathing animal. And yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And obviously the cast is important, mostly because of the limited specimens.
it. Yeah,
Every museum in the world has a T-Rex, but if they were only the real T-Rexes, you'd only be able to go to a handful of places to see them. But yeah, there's something magical about the real thing.
yeah, there really is. Uh, is there a fossil that would be number one on your wish list to find?
That'd be an Allosaurus tooth. That's the
Okay.
only thing I never found.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
I love raptors and I love finding raptors. I'd love to find a sickle claw of a Utah raptor or Deinonychus. I found a number of Dakota raptor teeth. I found a lot of Dakota raptor teeth where I dig is prime area. That seemed to be one of the top predators of that area. But
Yeah.
man, Allosaurus is still my favorite.
Well, my if I'm walking around outside and I trip on an Allosaurus tooth, I'll take a
Thank you. Yeah, pick it up for me.
okay. Um, if you were to, I just hypothetical, you're out on a dig, just you're on your vacation time or whatever. If you were to find a new theropod, that you're the first discoverer, and they after they describe it, they say, George, we're going to let you name it. What do you think you would call
I would the first of all the genus name would be determined by sort of what the animal is. I'd like to
it?
name it something in association to it. But I will say this that there is in the paleo world there is Dr. Thomas Holtz, who Thomas
Yeah,
Holtz is an incredible paleontologist with especially with theropods. And I would make the species name Holtzii. I would name it
yeah,
in honor of him. I've always said that if I ever found a new species of theropods, it would absolutely be named in honor of Dr. Holtz because of his work. But the first name that would be interesting, there's so many great names out there that you could give to a dinosaur. And I don't know. I mean, I'm a typical little boy in my brain. It would be vicious. you know,
no,
it,
no,
it can't be Fluffysaurus. It's gotta be something that makes you step back and
yeah,
yeah, yeah. So I don't know what it would be, but I would suspect the translation would be the angel of death or something
Right.
of
Yeah.
that nature.
That would be so cool. Uh, um, do you have a not? I'm not limiting this just to the United States, but do you have a favorite spot in the world to dig for fossils?
Yeah, well, I have two, and both because they're completely different. There's different fossils there. One of my favorite places on earth is in Wyoming, in a town called Kemmerer, where you can split rock and find fish. And
Cool.
I could sit there all day long and do that. Every time you split open a rock, it's like you've opened up a Christmas gift. And some of them, there's no gift inside. Some of them, there's something majestic. So I love that. But the other place that I could spend my life is in the Hell Creek Formation in Montana, where I dig. I find a lot of Triceratops, a lot of duckbill, Tyrannosaur, Nanotyrannus, such a vast variety that can be found, Pachycephalosaurus and Kylosaurus. So it's not just what you find, but it's what species you could find that make
Yeah.
that such a spectacular place.
You went on a dig, I think it was last summer, and you found something that you didn't actually have time to get all the way out of the ground. If you had a friend. Did you ever hear what that turned out to be?
Yeah, what it is, I actually have those bones in my lab. I have a laboratory where I prep fossils, and that's sort of my relaxation when I can get in there and get to them. So what it turned out to be is it looks like it's a potential bend in an ancient river, and you have a lot of animals being washed down during flooding, probably seasonal flooding. So for the entire prior to the flood season, you have animals dying naturally, being killed, and their bones are along the lowland floodplains. And so a flood will just gather all those and, send them downstream. And when you get a big bend in a river, well, those bones can sort of pile up. So what we had there was three different species, all those bones piled on top of each other. There appeared to be maybe four species: Struthiomimus. There was a scapula from a Triceratops. There was a femur from an Edmontosaurus, and there may have been a femur from Anzu, which is a sort of an oviraptorid.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a hodgepodge of stuff. And
Right.
my buddy, the guy that I go digging with, he stayed an additional 4 days, and he was able to get those out. But that spot, he knows that that spot continues on. So actually, this year I'm going back, and I'm going right back to the same spot,
Right.
and I'm
Yeah.
gonna back up about 8 feet and go down and then continue on. And there's
Back
just
there
no,
was good.
yeah, there's no telling what's there.
Cool. Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I'll look forward to seeing what you pull out of the ground next time.
Yeah, I'm hoping there's Tyrannosaurus there.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Have you ever found a complete skeleton?
No, no. Now I found one that's pretty close. I found a duckbill one time that was probably 85% complete.
Okay.
I found parts of a Diplodocus that was nearly complete. Yeah, it's
Wow.
a beautiful specimen. But all of those I was digging with people, and I didn't have any ownership rights. So all I did was I was lucky enough to find them and help excavate, but I didn't get to complete them. But the duckbills, yeah, I actually think there was three duckbills there, because as I was excavating, I found the tail of what appeared to be sort of a subadult, and then I found a couple of vertebra next to it that were twice the size that didn't belong to it, but it was still duckbill. And so, yeah, complete skeletons are just really rare. I mean, they get all the attention from the
Yeah.
media, but they're very, very rare.
Yeah. It sure be cool though, wouldn't it?
Oh
Oh,
man. But it's kind of funny. I've gotten to the point with my where I've gotten in my digging age is I enjoy finding individual bones. I just enjoy that because you can get them out relatively quickly. It's not a tremendous amount of work, but when you find a skeleton, like, okay, you got to draw field maps and you got to, yep. And it's plastering and it's all the necessary things to maintain the integrity of the fossil. When you're finding a single vertebra, there's not much there that requires any sort of, so it's more relaxing to find a piece than it is to find a skeleton. It's much better to find a skeleton, but I don't go away mad.
Yeah. We haven't found any dinosaur fossils here yet, but my wife found a piece of it looks like fossil coral,
Oh,
and
nice.
it's gorgeous. And it was just on our property. She's like, hey, there's it almost looks like a honeycomb.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, you know what would be what where are you guys located?
we're in Duchesne County, so it's north of Price and south of Salt Lake.
Yeah. So that coral may be Cambrian. I mean, you may be going way back.
Yeah,
One of the amazing things about that part of the state is all of the upwelling of the hills and the mountainous areas brought with it layers that were buried below, and so you get a lot of mixture of things. So that coral could be dating back way longer than you might think,
yeah,
and it just through the movement of erosion has worked its way up to the surface. So that's kind of neat.
yeah. Whenever we do any digging on our property, I'm like, any dinosaur bones?
Yeah, I get it. I
Yeah.
understand. Let me tell you real quick a story that my dad did to me. One time, my dad had a dump truck of topsoil delivered to our house when we lived in Washington D.C., and they dumped it on the front yard, and it was a mixture of soil and manure. And so he and his buddy were there to spread it, but they realized they told me that there might be fossils in it, gave me a shovel, and I spent the entire day. I spent the entire day, and he would tell me, "Well, throw some of the dirt over there, throw some over there," and I'm out there. It was my first experience at forced child labor. So I spread a dump truck. Yeah, I spread a dump truck of manure under the guise that there was a dinosaur in there. And my dad and his buddy sat on lawn chairs and watched.
Oh man.
It should be legal.
They could have thrown like some chicken bones in there or something.
Yeah, yeah. Give me something.
Oh man, that's funny. Do you have a favorite place to see fossils in Texas specifically?
Uh, so much of what I'm around me is sea life. And I'm not a big fan of sea life. I will tell you what I do love is I love seeing footprints. Now
Yeah,
that's something Texas has an abundance of. And a lot of it seems to be Acrocanthosaurus and maybe some sort of an iguanodontid. So there is a number of places the public can go see them, but I get invited a lot of times onto people's property to go look at their footprints. And 99% of the time, that's exactly what they are. They're footprints. So I love that. And there's a bunch in the Texas Hill Country, which is I'm sort of at the base of what is called the Hill Country. So very easily at 45 minutes, and I'm standing in an Acrocanthosaurus track. So I love that.
oh, sorry. Have you ever been to Fossil Rim in Glen Rose?
Yeah. 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 I like that as well. One of the things that I love about that is there's a story happening there that I think I'm the only person in the world that has argued this point. But if you've ever seen the tracks, it appears to be I don't know if they've changed the name again now, if it's they changed the name. It used to be Pluricilus, and then it was Parallatitan. And anyway, they changed the name of the sauropod, but it's a big sauropod, whatever, Paluxosaurus, I think now. But anyway, so you see these footprints of that big sauropod, the big long neck, walking along, and you see beside it what appears to be beside it an Acrocanthosaurus. And the story that everybody tells is that it's Acrocanthosaurus is stalking that sauropus, that big sauropod. But I completely disagree with it for a couple of reasons. Number one is the size difference between these two animals. A lion does not stalk an elephant. And so also there's no sense of panic in the footprints. They're very distinctively plodding along. So why would this acro be walking next to this sauropod? And in my opinion, they will ultimately find that once erosion has taken away layers on the other side, I think they're going to find juvenile sauropod tracks. And I think they're going to find that this sauropod was walking between its baby and that acro, and it is running interference. So it's a great site because you have this neat thing. Again, there, the accepted version is, well, this is evidence of it stalking and attacking. But I
Yeah.
disagree with that. I think this is going to turn out to be evidence of a of an adult defending a juvie.
When I was probably about 9 years old. My family went there because we had gone on a school field trip, and I told my parents about it. So on the weekend, we made the trip out there, and we're we're walking along, and the sun came. We're looking at the river there, the creek, and the sun came out, and you could see the sauropod tracks in the water.
Yeah.
And I was, oh wow, that's so cool. And
Amazing.
it was like August, and it was 150 degrees or whatever. You know how it is.
Right.
So we're waiting. We got down and we're wading the river, and I was at the front of the group. It was my parents and my brother and sister. Hey y'all, and um, the water was about chest level, and then next thing I knew, the water was at sea level. And I was a pretty good swimmer, so I just went up to the top, and I started feeling. I said, "Hey, there's a drop off here. Watch out!" And I started feeling with my feet around to see where it was, and I realized I had stepped in one of the sauropod tracks.
That great.
And for like an 8 or 9 year old kid, that was like the coolest thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love
You
that place.
yeah. You're standing in the spot. You know, the skeleton represents the death of the animal, but tracks represent the living animal. And that's why I
Right?
find them so amazing.
Yeah. That place is. Uh, can you tell us about the first time you gave a presentation at an elementary?
Yeah, it was in 97. I had quit my real job and I started my company and I opened up a little retail store, 1,200 square foot store. And I needed ways to let people know I existed. I didn't have a budget to advertise it. So I thought, well, what if went into a school and took a box of bones and things like that? And what if I got to talk to the students and I would say, hey, by the way, I have a store. So the very first time I ever did it, well, no, let me back up. I misspoke. Actually, it was in 96. And what happened was, through a series of friends, a teacher at an elementary school had heard that I dug up fossils and that my house looked like a museum. I had bones and stuff all over the place. So through this friend, this teacher contacted me. She said, listen, my kids get nothing. We're at a very low income school. They get nothing. They don't get to go anywhere. It would mean a lot if someone like you would come in and tell them what you do. And so I did. And so that was the first time I ever spoke to a group of school children. I went in and I spoke to these kids, and the kids loved it, and I absolutely loved it. And when I got home about 2 days after that, I received a letter from a parent of one of those kids. And that letter said, you came to my son's school. My son had no interest in school. And yet he came home and wanted to go to the library. He wanted to learn about dinosaurs. And I just wanted to say, he said he wants to be a dinosaur man. So that really impacted me immediately. That was one of those life-changing moments where I thought, man, I gave 45 minutes of my time. And for a moment, at least, this little boy's life was changed. And how many people get to do that? So that really started my career. So that was the first time. But I remember the first time I did a big group, like a big group. It was the entire school. And I was a little nervous, obviously, because, you don't know, you don't have your routine down yet. You don't know the order you're going to talk. And it was sort of convoluted. I was talking about sauropod for 1 minute and then talking about a Rex and jumping around. But I realized the kids loved seeing the bone so much it didn't matter. So I can still think back and remember how nervous I was. And now, to be honest with you, if I'm sitting with a group of two kids, I would rather be sitting with a group of 2,000. I've become so used to doing it that it's easier for me to become excited and, when there's a big group versus a small group. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Like kind of like a musician.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. I understand now what they mean. I totally understand what they mean by that. I never could figure out what that meant. You're right. You literally get energy from the audience coming right back at you. And it's just this perpetuating motion that everybody's excited.
Yeah. Can you tell us about a particularly memorable presentation at an elementary school? And if you have one that's funny, that doesn't hurt.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you my funny one. I make it funny. Part of my personality is I love to see kids laugh. I love to see people laugh. I'm a pretty joyous person. I've had my share of bad problems, but I find laughing does help soothe the body. And so I make them funny. And so I was doing this school one time in Seguin, Texas, and there was a little boy who was in the front row who was laughing so hard that he wet his pants. He literally wet his pants. So he stood up and walked off, and I could see he had wet his pants. And I felt awful. I felt horrified for him. So he walked off, and the teachers took him back. He was in the first grade. Well, apparently, first grade kids have a change of clothes that I guess they keep at the school in the event of issues. So he was left, and it really bothered me a lot. I thought, I hope kids don't tease this kid. Well, that kid came back, and when he walked in with this gigantic smile and screamed, "You made me pee my pants. You're so funny." And he starts laughing again. And I thought, oh, thankfully. But anyway, that stuck with me because for him, it was a badge of honor.
Right.
Every kid loved him. He was probably the most popular child in school because he actually peed his pants. So I remember that. One of the most touching ones, though, that I will never forget. This was at an outdoor event. I was speaking at an outdoor event, I believe at the Institute of Texan Cultures. And I was talking to the kids, and there was a little boy who was in a wheelchair, and he wasn't able to talk, but he could write on a little tablet thing. He could do things. And so I saw him. So, of course, I saw him laughing. So I made it a point to always make him laugh. And I would always turn to him and point at him and do my eyebrows up and down. And he was jumping around in his wheelchair, so excited about this. So, anyway, when it was all said and done, I was signing autographs and shaking hands and, kissing babies and running for office or whatever I thought I was doing. But anyway, his mother brought him up to me. And she came up and she was crying and she said, "I want you to see what he said." And I looked at his little pad and his pad said, "You made me so happy." And that's all it said. And I just thought, I'm going to start crying. I couldn't believe, but he had the time of his life. So it's funny because now I can be talking to a group of 3, 4, 5,000 people. And I make it a point to always see if there's somebody in the audience that could use an eyebrow raise, a point, a wave, a laugh. And so, yeah, so those are my two most memorable. The day I made a kid pee and the day a child made me cry. Those are my two favorites.
I was thinking when you said the kid came in and started laughing again after he beat his pants, you're like, "Give me your bottle of water, kid." No drinks for you till afterward.
Yeah, no kidding. He was so proud. He was so proud. His teachers were just laughing, and the kids were high-fiving him like it was an accomplishment. I'm like, I was so worried that he was going to be embarrassed. Was I foolish? This kid wears his name with pride.
And you're worried it's going to start a trend.
Yeah. Kids, don't show your enthusiasm. You can applaud. I take applause.
Oh. Okay. So, in the past, I'm going to say 2 or 3 years, this might go back a little bit further than that, but Brontosaurus has become a dinosaur again. And it seems like the Nanotyrannus debate has been settled for now. Are there any other dinosaur controversies that you think may be on the cusp of getting settled or put to bed?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Pachycephalosaurus is an omnivore.
Okay.
Now I bought a cast of a Pachycephalosaurus back in '95, and it had big canine teeth. And Mike Trebold, who is the paleontologist that found it, Mike Trebold, I said, are these canines? And he said, I'm telling you, these things are omnivores. He
That'd
said
be
that.
my baby at canines.
Yeah. And he said that all those years ago. And yet everybody else kind of poo-pooed the whole idea. One of the negative things about paleontology is it involves a lot of groupthink.
Right.
People are more worried about being part of the group than they are about standing up for their beliefs. Nanotyrannus is an example.
Yeah.
Back in 2007, I literally received what almost appeared to be threats that I dared to go against the group by claiming this animal was different. And I said, look, I've looked at every bone. I've looked at the skeleton of a nanotyrannus, and I've looked at the skeleton of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, a juvenile Rex, or bones from them, not the whole skeletons, but bones. And bone for bone, this is a different animal, same size, but it's a different animal. So I think what's on the horizon is I think they will find pachycephalosauruses are just very rare. There weren't very many of them, but I suspect it's going to be that they are omnivores, and I think they're going to find that that domed head was an excellent tool for knocking things down and literally knocking the wind out of them to be able to eat the thing. So I think that may be sort of on the horizon. The nanotyrannus thing is pretty much settled now. I mean, even the group thinks have finally had to come to conclusion that the evidence clearly says it. But it's funny that anybody would be mad.
Right.
Why would you be mad? I mean, why are so many people infuriated by this announcement? Why would you have such a personal? Well, it's because of the group thing.
Yeah.
And I was well.
Back in the say the maybe around 2010 or so. I might have my date a little bit off, but that was like the idea of dinosaurs being feathered, like foreknowledge,
Right.
and just like the non-specific, very vague, like dinosaurs had feathers thing got out there. So I would do a drawing of like Triceratops, and put it up, and people go, "You're supposed to do it with feathers."
Oh, I know.
And I was like,
I know. Every time I see a feathered face of a tyrannosaur, my first response is, do you have any idea what those feathers would be like when that animal is feeding? And how would it clean itself? They would just be a mass. Yeah, there'd be a mass of blood and sinew and meat, and the animal wouldn't be able to, I mean, how would you clean your face? Your tongue isn't going to reach and your arms aren't going to reach. Why does a vulture not have feathers on their head? For that same reason. So yeah, the whole feathered thing just exploded. But again, it was that line in the sand, group think. So and so said this, and so I'm on that side. And yeah, there's no doubt that there were feathered dinosaurs. But I tell you, as they get larger, theropods get larger, feathers have no function other than display. And if that is indeed there, then they're going to be in areas that would be utilized for that, the end of the tail, the back of the neck, maybe the arms, but they're not feathered. How do you feather a 6-ton animal? It would overheat. It would not, it couldn't survive. So yeah, the whole feather thing is kind of went overboard as well. I mean, I started seeing ankylosaurs with feathers.
yeah, like it's like, oh, the feathered dinosaur police are going to get into
Yeah, yeah, the feather police.
So speaking of Pachycephalosaurus and controversies, do you have any opinion about whether they were butting heads like rams or?
Yeah, I don't believe they were, and there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, the domes would show much more damage, even if they were covered with keratin. There would be, the shock wave that would go through the keratin would damage the bone underneath, and there would be more radiating damage to that. But the other reason why is the shape. When you look at a Pachycephalosaurus, first of all, the dome is rounded, sort of like a bowling ball. Imagine cutting a bowling ball in half, right, and gluing it to the top of your head. But you also have these rows of spikes that run along the back and edge of it. So if you take two Pachycephalosauruses and you put them down head to head and they run at each other, imagine running at somebody with a bowling ball. Correct. You're going to shear off. Well, the minute you do, his horns go into your eyes and my horns go into your eyes, and there's no benefit of two animals blinding each other during a battle. Animals are very cautious about that. When you see deer or elk fighting, they don't come running from a distance. They walk up, line up their horns, and push and shove because they don't want to put their own eye out. So
Rams get pretty close before they.
Yeah, right. And when you look at a ram, you notice that the curvature in the front makes a flat face. So they are hitting really with flat faces. Yes, those horns are curved, but the front of that is like the grill of a truck. So you can run and hit and you don't veer off. And even if you do veer off, the placement of the curved horns, those horns go backwards. They don't gouge out the eye of your opponent. So I don't believe pachycephalosaurs were doing that. But when you have a dome that is solid bone, that is a weapon. The body will not produce that kind of thing if it doesn't serve a purpose. Now, maybe they're not headbutting each other. Maybe they're standing shoulder to shoulder and swinging their heads into the flank the way giraffes fight. Giraffes
Right.
are brutal. Giraffes are brutal the way they swing their head into their opponent.
Yeah.
So you may have seen that sort of thing with interspecies rivalries, but I still believe that that dome is utilized as a defensive weapon against something he doesn't care whether he puts his eye out, or also a potential victim that you come running in and you hit something in the leg with that where you're going to shatter the leg and you're going to knock it on the ground and it can't do anything. If in fact we find that they are indeed omnivores. So I think that dome plays an absolute combative role, but I don't think it is interspecies head to head combat because of the shape of it.
Okay. That adds context because when in the past I've heard some paleontologists say no, they weren't headbutting, but I never heard any suggestion that they might have on the person before.
Right.
So like what are they for?
Yeah. Yeah. It that's for a reason. There's 9 inches of bone between the top of that thing and its brain. That's not, there is no animal on earth that's going to use the energy to grow that kind of skull if it doesn't play a very major role. And it's not display, because if it's display, there'd be air sacs and it'd be hollow. But this is solid bone. This is an animal that makes no sense.
Cool. Do are there? Do you have a specific paleontology controversy that you would like to see put to bed that just kind of is a burden?
I'm not sure. Um, I personally believe we've gone overboard with the feathers. We talked about that. I think that is an error. I think we made a big mistake because now everything has to be feathered, and there's not evidence of feathers on every single species
Yeah.
that's being depicted. And so I think it's a mistake to simply apply feathers. I mean, look, if we found a prehistoric ostrich and we found a prehistoric eagle and we based everything off the eagle, that ostrich would be feathered from the tip of its toes to the top of its head, or vice versa. Or penguins would have these long flowing feathers, not these short little skin diver feathers. So I think that's a mistake that I think still exists, is that we are so stuck on we find something interesting and we go nuts with it and it spreads too fast. The other thing I'd like to see is better information about the sounds, the potential sounds of dinosaurs. That's It's still in its infancy, basically, when it comes to being able to study the things necessary, because the thing that makes most sounds in animals is soft tissue.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily have that. So that would be interesting to see if there was some sort of consensus, or a better end result of the study of sounds being made by dinosaurs. I mean, I'd hate to think Tyrannosaurus Rex sounds like a chicken. That just ruins everything.
When we clone it, we'll genetically modify it to make it sound cooler.
Yeah.
Um, for me, one of the ones that I would be interested in, and I kind of think I haven't studied this in depth, but I kind of get the sense that this is more or less settled. But the Microraptor and Cryptobolon issue of whether they're separate species or whether they're the same. And for me personally, I would love to find out that Cryptobolon was a valid species, because Cryptobolon sounds really cool, and
Yeah.
also it's named after Greg Paul, and Greg Paul is he's a like a paleo hero.
He's one of my favorites.
And I think he deserves to have one named after him.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
do you have any opinion on that one, George?
I have never had the opportunity to study them close enough to know.
Yeah.
I do think that well, one of the things that happens a lot in paleontology is that we're quick to assign animals into a known species on limited evidence, but we're just as quick to come up with a new species based on practically no evidence. And
Right.
it's hard to find that balance between those two. You mentioned Brontosaurus and Apatosaurus as a prime example. You know, we've waffled back and forth because the more that's found, the more that's come to the realization they're two different animals. But I've never had the opportunity to study either one, so I wouldn't know if there's enough differences to justify the species, a new species. Um, you know, the difficult thing, like for a while, I think there was something like 25 Triceratops species. So, you know, they find one whose horn is cocked a little to the left, and that's a new species. And so they've kind of reined that in a little bit. I think we're getting much better at it. So I've never studied, I just couldn't tell you if they are the same animal or not. You know, the other thing is always there's an issue with sexual dimorphism, you know, variances between the sexes. And that can be confusing as well. Look at Parasaurolophus. I mean, you find a female Parasaurolophus and you find a male, and they look like two totally different animals, but only in the crest. Everything else is the same. And so it'd be very easy to say, well, this must be a different species when along it's just a female.
Okay. Well, I'm going to keep my fingers crossed for cryptobalance
Yeah,
anyhow.
it is a great name. Yeah. And I love Greg Paul. Let me tell you a neat story about Greg Paul. Back in 97, I contacted him because he drew this cool skeleton of a running Tyrannosaurus Rex. And I wrote to him. I had his book. He has a great book on theropods. And I wrote to Dr. Paul or Greg Paul, and I said, I don't know if he's a doctor or not, but anyway, I said, you have this skeleton, and I would love to make a photocopy or make a copy and put one on my window. And he was nice enough to let me do it. So I drove around with Gregory Paul's Tyrannosaur on the back of my Jeep for probably 5 years. It was his Tyrannosaurus.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's had, like most people, like he's not a household name, but he's had so much influence on the way dinosaurs are portrayed.
Yeah.
Like the Paul look.
Yeah. Yeah. He's one of those guys that isn't a group thinker, and therefore he's not interested in being in the clique. He's interested in his version of what he believes to be reality. And that's why I like him so much.
I might be confusing him with somebody else, but was he one of the early advocates for them being full-blooded and active?
Well, Dr. Bacher and John Ostrom they were the leaders of that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I remember reading Gregory Paul's book on theropods, and he clearly lets you know these are not slow moving, cold blooded lizards. So I would suspect that he would have been a very strong proponent of that. And you look at his artwork, he's a good artist.
Oh,
and,
man.
Yeah. And you look at his artwork, and he puts things to motion too. So I would suspect he would be.
Yeah. I would love to get to interact with him someday.
Yeah.
Draco Rex Hogwartsia. Do you have any opinion on whether that's a valid species, or is that just a juvenile pachycephalosaurus?
He falls in line with the whole Nanotyrannus nonsense. It is clearly distinctively a different animal. Stygimoloch, Draco Rex, Pachycephalosaurus, Homocephaly, Stegosaurus. These are clearly independently separate animals. And the thing about Draco Rex is if this were the representation of a juvenile Pachycephalosaurus, what it would suggest is this animal is middle-aged, and suddenly all of the knobs and horns on his head dissolve. They don't move, they dissolve. And then this 9-inch gigantic dome of bone begins to grow. But not only does it do that, but the shape of the brain then changes and the position in the skull would move. Well, what animal on Earth's brain moves into a different part of its body? I mean, there's insects and there's, flounder whose body shifts and changes. But other than those, there is no animal a baby crocodile looks like an adult crocodile. It doesn't grow a fifth leg at a stage in its life. And so I get very frustrated. I just want to say that I'm not going to mention names, but I will say this. There are people in paleontology who have either become addicted to publicity or they recognize that saying something very radical can get you a lot of attention, and
Yeah.
attention can get you on TV stations, and that gives you name recognition, and you're more likely to get funding. I hate to say that, and I'm not accusing anyone in particular, but I'm saying. And so when you start to make these sweeping ideas that this animal becomes this animal and it's a different stage, I don't think there's enough science to support that even being a suggestion. I mean, I could suggest that Velociraptor turns into Tyrannosaurus Rex. I could suggest that. And somebody would put me on TV and say, hey, listen to the nut. And I would get, and I would have followers that would praise me for, I've always said that. I've always been a Velociraptor to T-Rex guy. So I have the mold of the skull of Pachycephalosaurus, and I have the molded off of the Draco Rex, and they are so distinctively different. The jaw the configuration, the eye socket, everything is different, and that's like saying that a white-tailed deer grows up to be an elk. They're just not. So yeah, I disagree with that completely.
I'm delighted to hear that. Like, Draco Rex is a cool dinosaur. I'm like,
well, come on, it was named after Hogwarts. How can you not want a Hogwarts dinosaur?
Oh, we probably need a couple more.
Yeah, no kidding.
Is there one dinosaur museum or attraction that you think everybody should see if they can?
You know, there's good ones. I obviously the New York Museum of Natural History is pretty amazing because of their collection, but I don't like their display as much. I like the display at Museum at Thanksgiving Point. I like that more artistic um, effects went into it. I like that the animals are a little more exciting the way they're displayed. So that's a great museum. I'm not a fan of the static standing in line like soldiers. I don't like that. You know, the museum at Drumheller, Canada is really good. They're good about, you know, you see some neat stuff going on, and so that's a good museum as well. I talked about the one at Price, Utah. I mean, that I love their Gastonia. The Gastonias are so cool.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, are they the ones that have that life-size woolly rhino?
The Ethereum.
Yeah,
No.
yeah,
They do.
I think they do.
They have that, and they have a mammoth, and they have a bunch of early human skeletons with spears.
Yeah.
And that Laddle.
Yeah, Atlanta. Yeah, absolutely.
They have like, and it's like the mammoth is kind of rearing up, and
it's
like a 2-story room with a balcony that goes around.
See, I love that.
Cool.
I love that. Yeah, I'm so glad. You know what to me, what's happening in like the museum in Houston, the Houston Natural History Museum has really made improvements on theirs. What I kind of see happening in the museum industry is sort of what's happening with zoos. People have finally realized that an animal in a 10 by 10 cage is torture. And so they are giving these animals more of a natural habitat as best they can. And so people are seeing these animals in a natural habitat. Well, I see that happening with museums where now there's more emphasis on plants. In fact, in the last podcast, I mentioned what I loved about the dinosaur you posted is you did research and put the appropriate plant in your picture. I mentioned that. And so I see museums becoming more theatric, if that's the right term for it. And I love that. And so more and more museums are catching on that don't stand it up in the corner like a soldier at attention, make it do something.
Yeah. Cool. Give it some presentation.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Cool.
Make it look alive.
Yeah. Yeah. So at Thanksgiving Point, I don't remember the Bambi Raptor. It's like this.
Yeah, they're little Bambi raptors.
And they have a bunch of those, and they look like they're running around.
Yeah, right.
Like,
right. Yeah, when you see it, your mind completes the scene.
And like anytime I go to a dinosaur exhibit, I'm taking reference pictures. Oh, I want to draw that one. on that one.
Yeah, yeah, right.
um, is there a theropod that we have neither skin impressions or feather impressions of that you suspect might have been feathered?
Yeah, I think Utah Raptor and Dakota Raptor are going to have feathers,
Yeah,
but they're not. I do not believe it's going to be body covering. I believe that they are going to be display feathers, and I think they're going to be at the base of the tail and maybe not so much on the arms because they're using their arms. They're slashing.
right.
You have to look at it from the perspective of I can't have these gummed up, blood covered, mud covered feathers because my scent, you will smell me from 100 miles away. I've got to rid myself of that. So, yeah. So I do think that tail feathers are going to be a thing. And I base that off of you look at Bambi Raptor, you look at Archaeopteryx, you look at some of those feathered dinosaurs, and they clearly have tail feathers. Now, some of the smaller ones are using them for flight, as a rudder. But tail feathers are very important for most birds. Birds really like to show off their I mean, that song "Shake a Tail Feather" is in there because you're drawing attention to yourself. And I
Right.
suspect that at the base of the tail, you may find a paddle-like group of feathers. Now, as for skin impressions, I don't think they have any reason for armor, like you see in Carnotaurus, um, because they rely on speed and body armor just slows you down, and it's not a necessity. When you're a raptor, you're sort of the ninja of the animal kingdom, and you don't want anything that kind of hinders your ability to flex and turn and spin and move.
Right.
And so I suspect you're going to see that, and I think you may even find it with tyrannosaurs if they ever find any soft impression material on a tail. I bet you we're going to find it on them, maybe
Okay.
on the back of the head,
Yeah.
where I
Well,
think they would be able to make it stand up, you know,
you know,
something like that. But I think that I would like to see that anyway.
yeah. Similarly to what we were talking about earlier, I think a lot of artists feel pressured to, make it more like a chicken, make it more like a chicken,
Yeah, right.
with like almost any theropod. And so I see a lot of like, even the big raptors like Utah Raptor and Dakota Raptor, they have their hands kind of folded back, and like
Correct.
you see like the claws that they have on their three fingers. I'm like that's an active
Oh
like
yeah.
they're using those things.
Yeah, they are. Yeah,
So
I believe that they are grasping prey with their hands,
yeah,
steadying their body and kicking with their feet.
yeah,
And so their hands are coming in contact with the blood, the guts, and the gore. And you cannot have feathers around that again because of the scent you would give off. I mean, the smell of rotting blood is recognizable by every animal on the planet. And they would be.
you familiar with? There's a small. I might mispronounce this. There's a small raptor from China called Zhen Zhen Yuan Long Suni, and I want to say that they actually have like a fossil impression. It has these huge, they look like primary flight feathers, but it's a raptor that has the 4 digits.
Right.
And I feel like I had read that was the only one that they had that impression of, but
Right.
I'll admit I kind of take um, inspiration from that when I do
Right.
when I do raptor, I like to display feathers on.
Right. Well, I think the large feathers are realistic for smaller raptors who have the ability to fly because they're going to need those feathers, or at least as a windbreak. If you crawl up in a tree and you jump, they act as a parachute. Or as you're
Right.
chasing prey, you can use your arms like you look at a race car that throws a parachute out the back to stop the car's momentum. You could change directions quickly with those feathers, but those are all going to be small, and they're not going to have the arm thickness to rip you open with those feathers. They are grasping you. But when you start to look at Deinonychus and you start to look at Utah Raptor, they have the strength to be able to rip and tear with their feathers, not our claws. So they're not just grabbing you. So you can have feathers on your arms and you can grab your prey with your arms and you're not concerning yourself about what gets on them because you're using your feet and you're using your mouth. And so having big feathers, I mean, I think it'd be. I saw a study on Velociraptor that demonstrated that they do have long feathers on their lower arm.
Okay.
Have you ever eaten a chicken wing and you eat the lower end of the chicken wing and you see those little tiny nubs left on the
Yeah.
bone? Yeah, those are the attachment points to a long feather. Well, they found those on Velociraptor. So
Okay.
Velociraptor clearly has long feathers. He's not capable of flying. He can't lift off the ground. But what he can do is he can run and he can stroke like a burst of energy, or he can stick his right arm out and swing his body to the left, or he can stop or uh, maybe jump up into a tree with them, that kind of thing. But again, that's a smaller raptor and they're not ripping apart prey. So they're not covering those feathers with blood.
Given me all kinds of great ideas for illustration.
Oh,
That's
it'll look cool. Could you imagine? Yeah. Seeing them chase and stick an arm
yeah.
out, you stick an arm out and it's just this big windbreak that spins their body. I mean, I watched a mockingbird one day trying to catch a cricket, and the mockingbird was running because a cricket was moving so fast across the ground. And I watched that bird manipulate its wings to change and turn, never flew, was
Right.
just running, but changing direction so quickly with those wings. And you go, man, if this guy didn't fly, you couldn't catch him because he could turn so sharp and so quick. He's
Right.
chasing I was a grasshopper, and this grasshopper's moving for dear life. And this thing is just like, I couldn't believe how fast it was changing directions.
Right. That's cool.
Yeah. So Raptors probably did that as well.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely going to work its way into the comic.
Good.
Um, if you could meet just one paleontologist from the 19th century, who would you pick?
John Ostrom.
Yeah.
I would love to sit down with John Ostrom and just talk to him, just to see how he came up with his ideas and what made him ever begin. Well, most of all, what made him step away from the group.
Yeah.
He took a lot of heat.
Right.
He took a lot of heat for his ideas because they dared to go against the gang. And
Right.
I would have loved to have talked to him to ask him, if you could do it all again, would you? Did you lose any friends? Did you gain any supporters? I would love to have known that kind of stuff from him.
Yeah.
There was a guy named Juan Langston, Dr. Juan Langston. He was with the University of Texas in Austin. And Dr. Langston reminded me a lot about John Ostrom, kind of looked like him. And when we were filming Jurassic Fight Club, I got to sit with Dr. Langston and just talk. And it was just so fascinating to hear his version of things and how he felt and how he attributed his ideas to modern animals. He really used modern animals a lot in his understanding of prehistoric animals, and I like that a lot. But yeah, it would be Dr. Ostrom. That'd be great.
If is there a true story from the history of paleontology that you would like to see made into?
I would love to see a movie. Yeah, I would love to see an actual movie of the Bone Wars.
Yep, that
I
was
would
my
oh,
plan.
I would love to see a true historical, because I don't think people would believe it. I think they would think it's
Yeah,
fiction. I'd love to see them blowing up railroad tracks and shooting at each other and destroying things, and yet what it
healing.
did for science was pretty amazing.
Yeah,
It was pretty amazing, all the species, but I would love to see that turned
yeah,
into a movie. And I would also like to see a movie about Mary Anning, and not only her, but Gideon Mantell's wife, because I think it would be interesting to see the impact they had. Dr. Gideon Mantell's wife was very, very knowledgeable about fossils and about prehistoric life, but she was not allowed to participate because she was a woman.
right.
And so I would like to see her story of how hard it would be to bite your tongue when the men were talking and 10 times as much as they know. And you just want to tell them they're ignorant, but you can't. So I think those would be very interesting, but I think the Bone Wars would be the best.
Yeah, yeah. I could see the Bone Wars being done well as just straight historical drama, and I could see it done as kind of a comedy, but historically accurate because
Yeah.
those guys were nuts.
Oh, they were nuts. Yeah,
Yeah,
they were crazy. And I would love to see, that's why I'd love to see Jack Black play one of them or somebody like that who could play
actually,
a,
he kind of looks like George. Give me 1 second.
yeah. Yeah, he looks like
Just,
Marsh, I think,
yeah, I think
not
you're right.
Cope.
And I think
But
Willem Dafoe is Cope.
yeah, right, right. But he would make a great one because he could play a lunatic. I mean, he can be serious, but he can also play a nut. Wouldn't you love
Yes.
to see him when he's sitting there talking to his henchmen about, get some dynamite. And you're going to want to, I do not want that train making it to Philadelphia. I mean, just that kind of thing. You just go, this is the funniest scene.
So
Oh, look at that.
I was working on this poster. It's kind of promotional for the comic.
Yeah.
And so, when I was working on these two guys, because I was looking about the Dinosaurs here, I was like, because Jack Black has that crazy facial hair,
Right.
and I
Right.
thought Jack Black could play Marsh.
Yeah. What a great image. That's a great art. That's great art.
Thanks.
God, you're a talented artist. You really are talented. I'm not saying that because you're sitting here. I'm saying that because it's true. I mean, I've seen other people's art that is interesting, but I'm not going to brag on it because it's interesting and that's cool. But
You know, this is what I love to do.
yeah, well, you can tell.
Um, Another one that I would like to see done is Spinosaurus destruction during World War II.
Yeah.
With I cannot remember that fellow's name, but you could easily get you get a good screenwriter on that.
Oh yeah.
Research in terms of paleontologists, I think
Well, it wasn't just Spinosaurus that was destroyed. It was other stuff.
right.
I think Carcharodontosaurus and some of the other African stuff. So but what a fantastic story of how it's changed over time.
Yeah.
What they thought it was. I will tell you, there's one other mystery that I think would be incredible, and that's the mystery of this one giant sauropod vertebra that disappeared. It may very well have been the largest dinosaur that ever existed. It's surpassing the big ones of today. This thing, I want to say back in the 1800s, maybe early 1900s, there was a gigantic vertebra that somebody sketched, but it's gone.
Oh,
And there was a rumor that the last time somebody said they saw it was down in Brownsville, Texas.
okay.
And so it's lost to science. There is only a artwork of it.
Right.
And I don't know whatever came of that, but it was found by a legitimate paleontologist, and I can't remember who it was. It was interesting dinosaur. I want to say its name started with like Alta something, but I just remember seeing this sketch of this giant vertebra leaning against a wall in a building, and reading about it, and going, yeah, this thing disappeared somewhere. The world's biggest dinosaur vertebra is sitting in somebody's house.
Or imagine it sitting in a crate in a museum at the bottom of a pile of crates of stuff waiting to get examined.
It's next to the Ark of the
Ark.
Covenant. Yeah, yeah. That's one of my frustrations. I am very frustrated with paleontology and that there's so much unprepped stuff. Let me tell you a quick story. I contacted a jail, and these inmates are not violent criminals. And I went to the jailer and I said, museums cannot find enough people to prep the bones that they have. They have more bones than they could ever prep in 50 years. And those bones just sit there. What if those bones were sent to a prison or jail, a prison, and these prisoners were trained to prep? You could pay them 10 cents an hour to go towards their commissary.
Right.
They could have a legitimate career coming out of prison.
Yeah.
And they're nonviolent offenders and the museums. And so the prison, the warden I talked to said, nope, I don't want them doing that. And then the paleontologist I talked to said, nope, they're not going to touch my stuff. And I thought, what a bunch of ignorant fools. What a resource there could be
to
be able to prep these things. Because to your point, there's stuff that students find that nobody knows what they are because they lost track of it. They stuck a piece of paper to the crate and the paper got lost and nobody knows what's in there. And so,
Hey,
yeah, maybe that bone is sitting in some corner, and over time, people just hung their coats on it.
somebody's coffee table right now.
Yeah,
That's a weird looking coffee table. Oh,
yeah, I don't know. It was here when I got here. I don't know.
oh. So how big was it?
Big.
Did you tell from the sketch like scale?
Yeah, my understanding is it was taller than 7 feet, or I'm sorry, 6 feet. So it,
Wow.
it was 6 feet tall. It had the centrum on it. It was 6 feet tall. This was a big, big, big animal. Um,
I just remembered something. I'm so glad that I thought of this while we're on the recording here. Um, so in Vernal, Utah, which is about 30 miles away from where I am, and it's closer to Dinosaur National Monument.
right.
They have a field museum in town. And, they have like you walk in the lobby and there's like a cast of aquatic discs. It's a small museum, but it's pretty cool. They have um, some. I don't remember if they have like the complete legs or if it's just the humerus bones, but it's a Stegosaurus, and somebody just recently was re-examining them, and they figured, wait a minute, these might be the biggest Stegosaurus like bones ever. Like
Really?
these are approaching sauropod, like small sauropod size, like getting up closer to like Camarasaurus or something like that.
Right.
I just my wife brought that to my attention like within the last month. She just came across an article on her phone or whatever, and we've seen them because we've been in that museum, but
Yeah.
and like they've been sitting in that museum for like 40 or 50 years, but nobody ever made the connection that like there's something a little bit different about these.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's
There's
really,
so many museums that have those sort of
yeah.
mysteries that exist that yeah, Stegosaurus, I've changed my opinion so much over the years of Stegosaurus. I had the opportunity to spend 3 days with Dr. Robert Bacher once, and he
Cool.
and I spoke of Stegosaurus, and he loves the Jurassic. And he was talking about Stegosaurus being able to stand upright on his hind legs, and I just never considered that. And yet that appears to be the case. And in fact, Stegosaurus has an armored throat. And it never made any sense. Why do you have body armor on your throat when your head is this high off the ground? What would be able to get underneath it? And then you realize because if this animal stands up to feed, its throat is now exposed, and you want that armor in case somebody comes and grabs you by the throat. So, yeah, Stegosaurus may be bigger than we're thinking, and he must be doing something totally different. See, the problem with prehistoric life is it doesn't follow our version of what we think. It's got its own version.
So could it? Do you think that it could just stand up like a dog that begs, or did he need to put his feet up on the side of a?
When you look at him, his center of gravity is actually his back legs. It's not his stomach.
Right.
It's his back legs. And so he could stand upright and probably walk bipedally. And so, but his tail would be almost on the ground like a kangaroo.
Right.
And I think he would have leaned upon his tail, but I think he would have had the ability to walk. So I think this dinosaur could walk on his hind legs, but I don't think he spent a lot of time doing it because the fossil Stegosaurus tracks that have been found clearly show him being quadruped. So he's walking. He's like a hadrosaur, I think. Hadrosaurs mostly walked on four, but they stood up on two to feed. And I think Stegosaurus, see, that's the problem with Stegosaurus is his head is so low to the ground that he has such a limited food source. And to be that big, he can't survive solely on ferns. You've
Right.
got to have a variety of food, and you get that by going up a little bit higher in the vegetation. So I believe that stegosauruses are standing up on their hind legs every day of their life, getting getting into branches and getting into a food source that otherwise they couldn't reach. But I
Okay.
think they're also following sauropods. I think if you want a neat vision, I think watching sauropods would be like watching an armada of ships. I think sauropods are walking through the jungle, through the forest, and I think ankylosaurs or notosaurs, I think stegosaurs. I think they're all following them, and they're taking advantage of what's being knocked down or dropped out of the tree. So they're getting a food source otherwise they could never reach. And I think these animals would have been almost a sort of symbiotic relationship in that stegosaurs are gonna, they're gonna stand their ground against Allosaurus. They're not gonna run. And so I think it'd be an interesting thing to see juvenile sauropods hanging around closer to stegosaurs than their own parent. And I think they would rely on stegosaurs as sort of the go-between to defend them. And I think there's a lot of animals that would do that sort of thing. Of course, that there's no evidence to support that. But I think looking at modern animals, we could sort of hypothesize that. But yeah, so what if stegosaurs are much larger than we're thinking they are? Just the lack of a fossil doesn't mean you have now found the biggest animal. You just found what you found. And the big ones, what if they didn't like the lowland floodplains because of the chance of being trapped in floods? Maybe as they matured, they moved in the upland areas where you're less likely to be fossilized. We're finding what's living in the floodplains, and that's what we're finding. And so who knows what's going on in the upper woodlands? Who knows how big stegosaurus could get? What if Allosaurus only hunted little stegosaurs and didn't mess with the adults?
Right. It's cool. That Stegosaurus rearing up on its hind legs to get food is also making its way into the comic.
Yeah.
And for that matter, like you said, the armada of all the entourage for the cool idea.
Yeah. Well, you look at Africa and you see wildebeest, you see water buffalo, you see gazelles, all in the same area, and the gazelles are the lookout, and the wildebeest will run over you, and the water buffalo will just stomp you. And so those three all sort of live symbiotic together, and everybody just keeps their distance from the group. You don't want to be you want to be around those kind, and they tolerate each other because they're eating different food sources and they're not competing head on. So it'd be interesting. But yeah, I'd love to see an armada of dinosaurs.
Oh man, best thing ever.
Yeah.
One more movie candidate, The Discovery of Archaeopteryx.
Yeah,
that would be cool.
Yeah, especially how it changed a lot of paleontology. It changed a lot. To hear them argue, it's a bird, no, it's a dinosaur, it's a bird, it's a dinosaur, it's a dino bird, and everybody looks around and goes, right. Why does it have to be? Yeah, why does it? Yeah, feathers. And one guy comes out, I told you guys they were covered in feathers. Oh, great.
It'd be impossible to be around now.
Yeah. That'd be a good movie, though.
Oh, yeah. Nobody listens to me.
Yeah.
What's if for anybody who reads the comic or watches this on YouTube and they've never heard of you before, what's the place you would want them to go to find out more about it?
Easiest thing to go is to dinosaurgeorge.com. That's our website. And from there, it branches out into everything. Our podcast, it talks about my traveling museum. I have a museum in San Antonio, a free museum with really large pieces. And we would love to plug your comic book as well. Yeah. So, if you go to dinosaurgeorge.com, that place is where you can find everything, our Facebooks, all of that social media stuff. That's the best place to go. And of course, if you just like prehistoric life, listen to the podcast, and that you can just do a search on any podcast platform under Dinosaur George Kids.
Yeah. I'm going to, when the comic gets printed, I'm going to have some QR codes in the interview section.
Oh, cool.
Go to your website. And I also want to do one that goes to your GoFundMe campaign for Tinker.
Yeah, and that I appreciate very much. Yeah, that we have. I am happy to say we've probably reached over half the goal. A lot of people will not go through GoFundMe, but they'll mail us a check, which is very appreciated. And so yeah, we're going to keep that little. Hopefully, that little skeleton. Well, it's not little. I mean, that thing's the length of a bus. But that's a really neat project, and I'm very thrilled because kids walk in and see it and go, wow, that T-Rex is big. And you say, no, that's a 13-year-old. What? That's a
It's not
teenager.
even yet.
That's not even an adult yet.
Yeah. The next time we go to Texas, I want to. I've never been to San Antonio, but
Yeah.
next time we go to Texas, I'm going to stop by and hopefully say howdy.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Give me a heads up. I'd like to take you out to the museum and yeah, share a meal. And that would be a lot of fun.
Be awesome. Well, uh, George, I sure appreciate this, and I'm going to stop recording now.
Sure.